In the last class, we have discussed something about what are the different types of processes that are exist, and how they will share the information. These things overview which we have discussed in the previous class, and even the operations on the process. So let me quickly revise whatever we have learned so far before entering into the new one, right? So in this unit, what we have learned is what is the process, and what is the various stages that exist while executing the process. That means how it was created, how it is going to be enter into the ready state. After that, how it was processed by the CPU running state. Okay, and what way it is going to be terminated. Meanwhile, what happens? These things, the life cycle of the process which we have discussed, right? And after that, while executing your process, operating system should maintain some data structure, which is what we are calling it as process control block. It contains the information like a process state, process number, and program counter, like CPU registers, memory limit, and what are the other files that are already opened for executing this particular process. Like this, it maintains information regarding for each and every process, which was created in your system. Okay, so the PCB has maintained by the operating system. Why we need to maintain the data structure is, for that we have observed one case is how the CPU has switched from one process to another process to maximize its throughput. Right? That is context switch. Yeah, this is the diagram. So in this kind of scenario, if it exists, this kind of scenario, so that will make CPU as always busy, so that it is possible to complete n number of processes in a less amount of time. So this is what we are calling it as how the CPU is switched from one process to another process. Now, coming to the point, here the PCB plays an important role while shifting from one process to another process, because whatever the things that are executed up to now need to be saved somewhere, because the CPU will get back to this situation after a period of time. So once it come back to this process, from where it need to start? Okay, some next location it needs to start. After that, it needs the previously processed information for further processing. So in that scenario, the PCB plays an important role. That is the reason why operating system will maintain the separate data structure for each and every process. There is a process control block for P0. Similarly, there is another process control block for P1. So by using this PCB, it helps us while switching the CPU from one process to another process. And we have discussed what are the situations where the CPU need to be switched from one process to another process, right? Like that, we discussed all these things for understanding the process. And after that, we have discussed something about the various operations that we can perform on the process. As you all aware of that, for each and every process will be assigned with a unique number called process identification number, or simply you can call it as PID. P stands for process, ID stands for identification number, right? for parent. Here, another important point is one process may create any number of sub process, any number of sub process. So here, the process which is going to create another process is termed as the parent process, and the newly created process is called as child process. Okay, so here the point which you are supposed to remember is both parent ID and child process will have separate process IDs. Parent is having different process ID and child is having different process ID. And another point is parent is maintaining a separate parent in maintaining in the sense parent process will have separate PCB. Similarly, the child process will have a different PCB. Right? Like that, whatever it may be, the number of processes are created for each and every one, operating system will allocate a unique number with the help of system call, okay, unique number, and it creates a separate data structures for each and every process. I think it is clear to everybody. Okay, and now in the Unix operating system, the process scheduler is termed as SCHED, and initially it was assigned with the PID 0. Right? Later, once the system has started, the init process, the init means initialization. The short term for initialization is init. So once the system starts, it launches the init process, and it will be assigned with a process ID 1. From thereafter, whatever the other resources that are going to be started in order to make sure your system is working in proper way. So for all these things, it maintains, whatever the processes that are started, all of them are created parallelly. Right? Now you can observe the init process will act as parent for all the child process, right? And that is the process creation. Child process may create any number of child processes. Like that, depends upon their requirement. It is a continuous growing. So, as far as concerned with the process creation, what we have to understand, for each and every process will be assigned with a unique number, and for each and every process, the operating system will allocate or will create a separate process control block for each and every one. Okay, so the init will act as a parent process for all other processes which are created while the system has in startup time. Hope you are all clear with this point or not. Now, there are two different options for the parent process after creating the child. One is waiting for the child process to terminate before proceeding. So before it starts its execution, it needs to wait for a period of time until the child process has completed its execution. So that can be implemented with the help of a system call called wait. Right? Or another case is without waiting for the child. Okay, child was created and it has started its execution. Okay, leave it that one, and the parent process will parallelly do or executing its own task. So that is another approach. Either it need to wait for child to complete the task, or otherwise simply it creates the child process, leave it, and the parent process continues its execution. These are the two different possibilities that exist for the parent process after creating the child one. Right? And another important point is here the fork or the span are two different system calls which are used for creating a process. Fork and span. Now let me differentiate these two system calls, right? So now, coming to the address space of the children or child process relative to the parent. What I mean to say is, parent process, once it was created, operating system will create a data structure for a PCB. Say, for example, parent process ID is 1. Let us assume that parent process ID is 1. Okay. So the operating system will create a separate PCB for the process 1, whose process ID is 1. Okay. And in that, once again, I'll show you the process control block diagram so that you can easily understand. Now, this is the PCB. What are the fields in the PCB? What it maintains? Process state. Process state means it could be any one of the 5 states. That is, whether it is in a new state or ready state or running state or waiting state or terminate. So at any given point of time, if you observe, the process should be in any one of these 5 states. Okay, and every process will be assigned with a number called process ID, and program counter, which maintains the address of the next instruction to be executed. And it uses, every process may use a set of CPU registers. For each and every one, there will be a memory limitation. There will be a memory limitation, and some of the files which are open for executing this process. This whole information is maintained in the process control block. This kind of block is created for each and every one. Now, coming to our discussion. Yeah. So here, so now process, the parent process creates a child process. Now parent process is having a PCB and child process is also having a PCB. Now, what is the memory? Whether the child shares or it uses the memory of the parent or it creates its own. These are the two different possibilities in terms of address space. Suppose while creating the child process, if it duplicates the parent address space, each and everything, not only parent's address space, all of them except the process ID. Except the process ID, whatever the contents that are present in the PCB of parent will be duplicated as child. Only the difference is between parent and child is the process numbers of both the processes are different, remaining all are same. If a process is created in such a way, that could be done with the help of fork system call. Wherever you use the fork system call for creation of the child, what happens internally? Whatever the parent for which you are going to create the child process. Okay, so the parent PCB is duplicated as child process. That means another copy of parent PCB is created, and that could be assigned to the child by changing the process number with the child's process number. Instead of that, that is fork system call. Instead of that, while creating the child, if entirely new PCB has created, there is no relation between parent and child. I mean, in terms of similarity, what I'm talking about relation means there is no common information that is shared among these two. Entirely, a new copy of PCB is created when you create the child process using span system call. So this is happening in Windows, whereas the fork system call usually used in Unix operating system. It depends upon the operating system implementation. Hope you are all clear with these 2 points. So far what we have discussed, process life cycle, what is the importance of process control block, especially in switching the CPU from one process to another, context switch, right? Thereafter, we have discussed the operations on process. In that, the process creation, what way it was created, what are the things that are existed or that you are supposed to remember while creating the chain, okay, and even terminating. So it is the fundamental right of the process that can be terminated with its own. Okay, if that particular process thought that yes, the execution of our current task is over, so forcefully it can be on. So that can be done with the help of exit system call. That can be done with the help of exit system call. Okay. Sometimes your process may be terminated by the system with variety of reasons. What are those? Suppose whatever the resources that are required by a particular process is no longer available, then what it has to do? How long it will be put it in waiting state? If probably if it is used by some other resource, okay, let us think, okay, over a period of time, probably those resources may be released by that particular process. Once again, I'll clear this point. The resources required by the particular process is no longer available. For example, in order to complete my task, I want 1 crore rupees. As of now, I don't have that much of amount. Or as of now, I'm unable to adjust, or I'm unable to collect it from my friends, well-wishers and all. That is not possible for me. What happens in that case? I need to stop that process because there is no other option for me. I am unable to collect 1 crore of rupee within the stipulated period of time. So I need to stop that particular task and think about other one. So in the similar way, whenever whatever the resources that are required by a particular process is no longer available, in that case, system will automatically terminate it. Right? Sometimes the process may be stopped when you are using kill command. Kill command, what it does? The kill command is used for forcefully terminating the processes which are in running state. Right? Like that, there are several reasons which are caused for terminating the processes by the system itself. So, as of now, all of you are clear with all these points because the concept which we are going to be discussing now plays an important role. I mean, it is a very important concept. So that is the reason why I am repeating the previous concepts which we have discussed so far also. All of you clear with all these points? Or still, if you have any queries, you can ask. Yeah, you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question, or even drop the message in the chat box. Make it fast. These points, once you are clear with this, so that you can easily understand the inter-process communication. Of course, I was given a brief idea about this inter-process communication and even in the last class, but now we'll see elaborately the inter-process communication. Any queries? So shall I continue? I did not get any kind of response from you, either in the chat box or nobody has raised a question. Okay, hope you all understood up to now. Somebody has to do it. Okay, thank you. Right. So I hope you all understood up to now. Okay. Uh, Now let us see the inter-process communication. Inter-process communication means, before going to discuss about inter-process communication, one should understand what are the different types of processes that exist. Okay. So basically, based on the behavior, we'll be classifying the processes into two categories. One is independent process and another one is cooperating process. Based on the behavior, will be classified like this. Independent process means which cannot, uh, which can be executed with its own by without disturbing any other. Right? It won't disturb any other. It continues with its execution, whatever it is. So what happens in that case? If a process is executing in such a way, what it indicates? Yes, there will be a guarantee that the process is executed in an efficient way, because it won't be a think about other processes and all. Simply straight away to go with whatever the task that it is having. It continues its execution and it was finished. So what is the outcome of this process is, it can be executed in an efficient way. The another side is cooperating processes. Cooperating processes. Why we need to have cooperating processes? The independent processes, the efficiency is good, but it reduces the computation speed, because only one task will be executed. After completion of that particular task, the another task. That means sequentially one after next one will be executed. So in that case, what happens? The CPU is getting idle for a long period of time while executing independent processes. So, in order to improve the computation speed, or majority of the cases, so many processes need to exchange some information, need to share some information, need to pass some data between one another. So such kind of processes are called as the cooperating processes. Okay. There are several reasons why the cooperating processes are allowed. Is the first point is information sharing. There may be several processes which need access to the same file. For example, you can talk about water pipeline in your house or anywhere. So water pipeline is a pipe which started from the source and it will be ended at the destination. Meanwhile, so many taps are connected. So if you open all these taps, probably if you get the water, if the pipe is allowed to pass the water from source to destination, right? So what happens in that case? All these taps, with the help of all these taps, we can use the water in between the source and the destination, right? In the similar way, here also, if a single file can be used, or the information which is present in the file may be used by multiple systems. That is possible. Okay. And a second one is computing speed up. See, as we have discussed, what happens when the CPU is switched from one process to another process, how effectively it was shifted, and so that what way we can improve the throughput and all we have discussed in that. Okay. And modularity. Modularity. So it is possible. It is actually an efficient architecture. With this architecture, we'll split or we'll break the system into a different cooperating modules. Especially, you can think about the client server databases with the client server architecture, where what way the processor exchanging the information, right? And convenience. Even single user may be a multitasking, such as editing, compiling, printing, and running the same code in different windows, right? So I don't know whether you tried it or not, but it is possible. You can run the code in different windows in a different way, right? So in such a way, you can as per your convenience, you can run the. So in all the cases, what is the key point that you are supposed to be understand is when you are open to multiple windows here itself. For example, if you're talking about the so this is one window, this is another window, this is another window. What happens in this case? Here, three different processes are running. Suppose you can type something here itself and you can type something here itself. Like that, you can type all this information. I don't think so. The screen is visible to you. Let me show. So now you observe this is one tab and this is another tab. This is another tab. What happens in this case? I can do some operation here itself. I can type something here itself. I press enter and then I'll go to the another tab where I can do press something. Right? Parallelly, I can do all these things. Suppose if this kind of facility is not available, you can treat each and every one as an independent process. What happens in that case? You need to finish this task, then you can close it, and again you reopen the same web browser where you can open the second link. Like that you need to do. If it is independent process. Instead of that, if it is a sharing process, what happens in that case? It is more convenient for us to share the information among one with one. So basically, the processes are categorized into two. One is independent and another one is cooperative. Okay. Now, so inter-process communication is the mechanism provided by the operating system that allows the processes to communicate with each other. Inter-process communication. That means the communication that exists between the two different processes. How they are communicating with each other is called as, whatever the mechanism that you have adapted for the communication between the two processes is called as inter-process communication. So with this communication means either they may share the data or they may share some events that are occurred or some information between one another. So whatever it may be, you can observe the communication with the help of this diagram. Process 1 and process 2. Whatever you want to share between these two, that mechanism is called as inter-process communication. How this information is transferred from this to this one and this to this one. These all things, the whole mechanism, how this connection is established, what way it transfers the information from here to here, process 1 to process 2 and process 2 to process 1. Okay, so this whole mechanism that exists between this process 1 and process 2 is called as inter-process communication. Okay, what are the different approaches that are used for inter-process communication is, of course, we will see elaborately about all these things very soon. For only just for better understanding, I was given some information regarding these approaches. Okay, in that the pipe, just like you can imagine in your brain, water pipe. Water pipe is always unidirectional or bidirectional. Always it is unidirectional. It starts from the source and it will end at the destination itself, right? If you want a two-way direction, two-way flow, bidirectional, what happens in that case? You need to establish two pipes, right? So with the help of this pipe, what we can do? We can share the water or we can transfer the water from one place to another place. So similar kind of mechanism that we can implement here also for transmitting the data, for transforming the data from one place to another place, right? So that is one approach. That is what we are calling as pipe. Another one is socket. Socket. You can think about your plug point in your electrical plug point in your homes, at your homes, right? Where 3-pin plug, 4-pin plug, it is a socket where you can put something, okay, so that the current will be passed from that point to, suppose you can talk about your mobile charging. What you will do? You just connect your charger to the socket and as well as your mobile phone. What happens? Why you need to connect like this? Just getting the power from your board to your mobile. So with the help of that socket, if you don't have such kind of mechanism, how you could, it is not possible, right? So a socket is an endpoint for sending or receiving data in a network. For sending or receiving a data, right? Especially in our computer system, we'll use the sockets for communication between one system and another system. We'll use a different socket numbers, port numbers for different servers and all. Okay, so this information you can learn in the computer networks very soon in the later semesters. Okay, until then, you just remember that this is an endpoint for sending or receiving data in a network. Okay, and most of the operating systems use the sockets for the inter-process communication. Don't worry, we'll elaborately discuss about all these things very soon, uh, especially in communication in client-server environment. Okay, until then, what are the possibilities that exist for implementing a inter-process communication? That you need to be thinking with all these definitions. A file. What is a file? A file is usually a collection of information stored on a disk, right? The same file can be used by multiple processes. Suppose if it is placed in the file server, the multiple processes can access that file wherever they require. Okay, and operating system uses files for data storage, right? So this is another approach by which we can implement the inter-process communication. A signal, usually it is used by the system itself. Okay, signals are very useful in inter-process communication in the limited way. They are system messages that are sent from one process to another process. So usually these are not used for transforming the data, just used for remote commands between the process, just transferring the remote commands from the different process. Okay, now majority of the cases people are using two important approaches while implementing the inter-process communication. Is one is the shared memory, another one is message queues. So these are the two better approaches that are usually majority of the operating systems that implements for the inter-process communication. Now let us look at about the shared memory. Shared memory is the memory that can be simultaneously accessed by multiple processes. That means if you keep a single storage area which is common to all the processes, all the processes, just like public toilets, where everybody can use it, which is common to all. Like here also, we'll maintain a common area which can be used by all the processes, right? And usually what they will face is whatever the common information that need to be shared among the various processes will be placed in the shared memory. So all POSIX means portable input output systems uses the this kind of shared memory concept. And message queues. So multiple processes can read and write data to the message queues without being connected to each other. Just simply whatever they want, they will place it. They will type a message and place it in a queue. Automatically, it will be processed. Even though you don't have direct connectivity between the sender and the receiver, with the help of this message queues, your purpose will be served. Okay. So let us have a broad look about this shared memory and the message queue. So first point everyone should understand is these are the different approaches which are used for implementing the inter-process communication. Either you may implement pipe by using pipes or socket, file, signal, a shared memory or message queue. By using any one of this approach, you can do it. So cooperating processes, now coming to the point, cooperating processes requires some types of inter-process communication. If it is independent process, you need not, because the process straight away continues its execution, it won't disturb any other process. But whereas in the cooperating process, it needs to share the information among the other processes. Okay, so that is the reason the cooperating processes require this kind of inter-process communication. Now, we can all of you observe the this is the way how the shared memory will be accessed by process A and process B. This is the process A and this is process B. This is the shared one which is common to the both the processes. Whereas coming to the message passing, for all these processes, it maintains a message queue where each and every process, whatever it wants or whatever it wants to share with others, that need to be placed in the message queue. Of course, this is not that much of easy. We need to think about so many things, what way it will specify or what way this particular request is processed without knowing the destination. So in order to process this request, what it is supposed to maintain, what kind of information that it should contain, these all things need to be addressed. And for each and every mechanism is having a set of challenges that you are supposed to be implemented. So now have a look at about our the shared memory. The shared memory is the faster once it is set up, because no system calls are required and access occurs at normal memory speeds. However, it is more complicated to set up and does not work as well as across multiple computers. So shared memory is generally preferable when large amounts of information must be shared quickly on the same computer. If it is separate computer, say for example, you want to access the memory which resides in a separate computer, what happens in that case? You need to be connected to that particular system by establishing a network between your system and the your destination system. Okay, then only you are able to get the access of this, right? If it is the within the single system, you need not establish any kind of network. Okay, directly if you know the address, if you know the address of the location, shared memory location, you can directly go to that place and you can access whatever the information that you want. So that is the reason usually this kind of approach is used when you want to transfer the large amount of data within the system only, within your computer system only. But when you want to share among other processes or other computer systems, it is better to go with other approach, that is message passing approach. So message passing requires some system calls, because for every message transfer and is therefore slower, because for each and every message it should maintain some information like to which it is going to be communicated. Okay, for all these things it need to use the system calls. Okay, so message passing is generally preferable when amount frequently of data transfer is small or when multiple computers are involved. Okay, whenever if the two processes exchange the information, a small amount of information which it want to exchange by the both the process, or in a network. In a network means a collection of systems are connected one with another. If you want to share the information among those computers, then you can go with the message passing. So in the shared memory, you need not use any system calls. Okay, whereas in the message passing, you are supposed to use system calls. Okay, and in the shared memory, usually this can be used when you are transferring, when you are exchanging the information between the two processes which are exist in the same computer. If it is different computers, you will go with the message passing. Now, that is about a brief about the shared memory and as well as message passing. Now, have a look at on the shared memory system, what happens right from the beginning to the end. Okay, so in general, the memory to be shared in a shared memory system, not data. Okay, only the memory address. Initially, with the address space for a particular process which needs to make system calls in order to make that memory publicly available to one or more other processes. Okay, other processes which wish to use the shared memory must then make their own system calls to attach the shared memory area onto their address space. So probably you may have a doubt like, sorry, as you said, shared memory is no longer required a system call. When it does not require system call is once you set up all the process, because once you set up means, okay, you have defined certain space and you just inform to all the processes, this is the common area. Okay, whoever wants to access it, you can use it. Like that, if you dedicate certain place as a shared memory and you have informed to all the processes, in that case, you need not require any other kind of system call. That is what we have called it as once your shared memory is, once it was set up, then no system calls are required and access occurs at normal memory speeds. Okay, whereas here what I mean to say is this is all you can think about the setup process. So whatever the process that it want to share the memory, so that information need to be passed in the publicly available place, so that the other processes, those who want to access that memory, they'll make their own calls to attach that memory area onto their address space. Okay, so generally few messages must be passed back and forth between the operating process first in order to set up and coordinate the shared memory space. So in order to set up and coordinate the shared memory space, what happens internally, a few messages must be passed back and forth between the operating processes. Those who wish to use the shared memory, okay, they can pass certain messages between them before setting the shared place. Okay. Now the advantages of the shared memory model is memory communication is faster on the shared memory model as compared to the message model on the same machine. Once the memory space is set up, so that what happens directly, that address will be added to the operating process. So within no time they can access the data from the address space. Whereas in the message passing, what happens? Every message need to be placed in the message queue. That again, that will be processed with the help of other system calls, even though it is memory related issue. Okay, so for doing all these things, it takes probably more amount of time when compared with the shared memory system. And coming to the disadvantage of the shared model is all the processes that use the shared memory model need to make sure that they are not writing to the same memory location. Same memory location. What happens in that case? If 2 or 3 processes write their content in that location, what happens? It will be overridden. So that what happens? Whatever the content that it was written onto the memory location recently, that is only available. The previous, all the information which you have written in the location is going to be erased. So that is one problem. And another problem is shared model may create problems such as synchronization and memory prediction that need to be addressed. Of course, once if we have time permits, we will discuss the synchronization in the shared memory process. Until then, you need to be remember this point in the shared memory environment, the synchronization, how the processes are executing, that is which one will be executed first and which one will be executed last, and how it allows that location is going to be shared by all these things. These all things will become some complicated task. So these all, in order to reduce this complexity in these problems, you need to be define an efficient mechanism. Okay, that is, those are the problems in the shared memory environment. Okay, now let us have a look at the places where the systems that are using the shared memory. So some example is producer consumer example. Like that, we need to be discuss some examples for each and every one, message passing and as well as this one. So first let me finish this message passing system also, how it will be what is the process that exists. If two processes P1 and P2 want to communicate with each other, they proceed as follows if they follow the message passing mechanism. Okay, the first point is establish the communication link. That means if you want to exchange something between this process and this process, there should be a link. Without having link, you cannot communicate. Okay, and you can start exchanging the messaging using basic primitives like read, write, send, receive. Okay, now here the point is the message size can be a fixed size or a variable size. If it is fixed size, it becomes easy for the OS designers to pass the information from one place to another place. But it is difficult for the programmer. It depends upon the size of the programmer data, how it is going to be transmitted, how it is going to be split into blocks, and how many number of blocks are transmitted. These all things become a difficult task for the programmer. Okay, if it is variable length, it will be difficult for the operating system, because there you need to implement a different mechanism how to handle this variable length or variable size message. But programmer, you need not worry about how the data is going to be transmitted, because the OS will take care of it, right? So a standard message can have two parts. One is header and the body. The header part is used for storing the message type, destination ID, source ID, message length, and the control information. The control information, it contains like what to do if it runs out of the buffer space. Suppose if your buffer space is 1 KB, if you are running with more than that, so what it has to do? Okay, and suppose 10 blocks are there. First block has transmitted, second block is having more than the capacity is available. Okay, and then how it could be handled, that kind of situations. Okay, this all the control information will be placed in the control information part. Okay, so message passing systems must support a minimum system calls for send message and receive message, and a communication link must be established between the operating process before messages can be sent. Okay, and there are three key issues to be resolved in message passing system. As one is whether the link is direct or indirect communication, synchronous or asynchronous communication, automatic or explicit buffering. So these are the key issues which we are supposed to be discussed regarding this message passing. So up to now, we just understand what are the two different mechanisms which are available for sharing the information among the cooperating processes or inter-process communication mechanisms. One is shared memory and another one is message passing. Of course, some other approaches are available like pipes, sockets, files, signal and all. Among all these things, these two are more popular. So that is the reason why we need to be discussing all these two, right? So in the next class, we will see the examples for these two different concepts. Okay, and then we'll move to the next lecture. Okay, now, yeah, I'll start the session now. You can ask any queries that